Dad, what is the point of this? You might as well have wrapped up a parking ticket. That was what my son said. Not muttered, not set aside, announced. Loud enough for the couple at the next table to glance over. Loud enough that the chatter at our end of the room dropped out like a radio cutting to static. Loud enough that my grandson Leo, who was sitting right beside me with a clip-on tie he'd picked out himself because he wanted to look nice for the occasion, went very still and stopped smiling. I am Vernon Holt, 67 years old. I built Holt Construction Group from a used pickup truck, a borrowed transit level, and a $6,000 line of credit at the Bank of Montreal into one of the most respected mid-sized construction firms between Oakville and Barrie. I laid subfloors in January cold. I drove to job sites before sunrise in ice fog off the lake. I did the books at the kitchen table after my wife Marguerite put our boy to bed. I did all of it so that one day, someone I loved would carry it forward. That evening, in a private room at a restaurant in downtown Toronto, I learned what that someone had become. Leo was 8 years old. The envelope I'd handed him contained a printed certificate for an Res-Ep contribution, a registered education savings plan deposit, $2,000 toward whatever he wanted to be. The government would match 20% of every dollar I put in. By the time he turned 18, it would be a real foundation, something to stand on. My son looked at the certificate the way you'd look at a used receipt. "Dad," he said, turning it so his wife Rochelle could see, "this is a dinner that costs $300 a plate. We have guests." He gestured around. Business partners, Rochelle's friends, a hedge fund associate whose name I never caught. "You brought Leo a savings account printout." "It's in RESP," I said. "It grows, it teaches him." "It teaches him that his grandfather lives in the past." He set the paper face down on the table. "You live in our house, Dad. You eat our food. We pay the insurance on your truck. And you couldn't manage a proper gift for my son's birthday." Leo was looking at his plate. The clip-on tie suddenly seemed too large for his neck. I pushed my chair back. "We haven't done the cake," my son said, not looking up. "I'm tired," I said. "I'll take the GO train." He laughed. Not cruel, exactly. More the laugh of a man who has decided he can laugh at you without consequence. "Suit yourself. You know where the Oakville stop is." I walked out of that restaurant with my back straight, and I did not look at the other guests, and I did not look at my son. But here is what my son did not know. He did not know that Holt Construction Group was not his. Not technically, not legally. The company was held in the Holt Family Trust, a revocable trust, drawn up the day I retired, the day I handed him the keys. I was the grantor. He was the operating trustee and the named beneficiary. Those are different things. He never read the difference carefully enough. 4 years of signing authorities and expense accounts and letterhead with his name on it had made him forget that the whole arrangement rested on one thing: my willingness to leave it in place. I walked 3 blocks to where my old F-150 was parked, sat in the cab with the engine off, and listened to the October cold settle against the windows. Then I called Holden Burke. Holden had been my lawyer for 22 years. He drafted the trust. He had been waiting for this call the way careful lawyers wait for the things they've already prepared for. "Vernon," he said, picking up on the first ring. "It's time," I said. A pause. "All right, full recall." "Full recall. Move the operating accounts to the holding company tonight. Freeze his signing authority at RBC first thing in the morning. Cancel the corporate cards, both of them. And the Oakville property, it's in the trust. Send a termination of occupancy notice. 15 days. Vernon, 15 days is." 15 days, Holden." A quiet moment. "Done. And you?" "I'm going north," I said, "to the cabin." I put the phone in my jacket pocket. I started the truck. I drove. I have a cabin on a lake 2 hours north of Barrie. I bought it in 1998 for $82,000 when people thought I was being foolish, and I have never once agreed with them. Marguerite and I used to spend September there every year. After she passed, I went alone. I chopped wood and repaired the dock, and the loons called across the water in the dark, and it was the only place on earth where I felt entirely myself. That night I drove there in the cold, and I did not look back. By 7 the next morning, sitting with a mug of coffee and the lake flat and silver outside the window, I knew exactly what was happening 60 kilometers south in Oakville. My son would be awake. He was always up by 6:30. He would go to the kitchen, my kitchen in a house I bought in 1994, and open the RBC app on his phone, and the number would be wrong, not glitch wrong. Wrong like a door you open expecting a room and finding only wall. Corporate operating account, access suspended, grantor authorization required. His salary account, frozen pending trust directive review. The Amex Platinum both cards, cardholder authorization revoked. I imagined the first swipe, the second, The third, the moment when he sat down. Then Rochelle coming downstairs asking why the programmable thermostat was showing a locked screen. The smart home account was registered to the trust. I disabled the automatic top-up before I left the driveway. He would call the bank. The bank would ask him to contact the trust grantor to restore access. He would call Holden. Holden would let it go to voicemail. I poured a second coffee. He drove up to the cabin 3 days later in his mother-in-law's Hyundai because every vehicle on the Oakville property was registered to the trust. He hadn't shaved. He was still in what looked like yesterday's clothes. I watched him come down the gravel lane from the kitchen window. He stood outside for a moment, looking at the cabin the way a man looks at something he'd forgotten was real. I opened the door before he knocked. "Come in," I said. "There's coffee." He came in. He didn't sit. "You've frozen everything," he said. "Payroll is Friday. 32 people. I have a draw going through with the lender on the Brampton project. Holden won't pick up. I can't." "I know," I said. He spread his hands. "This is about last night, about what I said at dinner." "It's about 4 years," I said. "Last night was the last piece." I was embarrassed. I was with clients. "You gave an 8-year-old a savings plan certificate. You told my grandson his grandfather's gift was a parking ticket," I said. "In front of his father's business partners, in front of his mother's friends, in front of everyone at that table. And Leo was sitting right there wearing a clip-on tie he picked out himself because he wanted to look nice." My son was quiet. "You told him I live off your charity," I said. "You took the one thing I gave him, and you held it up for the room to laugh at." He sat down. For a moment he looked almost like himself. "I'm removing you as operating trustee," I said. "Holden has filed the paperwork. The board meets Thursday. You'll have 7 days' notice as per the agreement." He looked up. "You can't." "The agreement is very clear," I said. "I can and I have." "And the house?" 15 days. He left without the coffee. The door swung open behind him, and the cold came in, and I closed it and stood in the kitchen for a moment, listening to the gravel under his tires fade into the trees. Then I went back to the window and watched the lake. For 3 days it was quiet, then Holden called. My son had retained a lawyer named Aldworth and was pursuing an emergency injunction, claiming the grantor lacked capacity to make sound financial decisions. He was telling business contacts I had gone off. He was using the word deterioration. He had also, Holden told me carefully, made a phone call. Holden played me the recording over the phone. My son's voice, calm, businesslike, the voice he used in project meetings. "He's at the cabin. He's alone. If we can get him to sign voluntarily, or if we can get Bergman to do an assessment and flag a capacity concern, the court will freeze his authority as grantor while the petition is pending. It buys us time. We just need him to sign one document and we can undo all of this." I listened to the whole thing without speaking. When it was done, I asked Holden where Leo was. "Rochelle's mother's house in Etobicoke," he said. "My son pulled him from school 2 days ago. Told the school it was a family emergency." A pause. "He's okay, not hurt. But he's scared, Vernon. He keeps asking about you." "Get me Judge Pelletier," I said. Andre Pelletier had a summer property 2 lakes over from mine. We'd argued about hockey and eaten fish he'd caught, and he was the most honest man I'd met in any courtroom. He would not refuse a call about a child. "It's late," Holden said. "Tell him it's Vernon Holt," I said. "Tell him it's about a child." There was one more thing in Holden's folder. Over 4 years, my son had been adjusting numbers. Inflated material costs on 3 builds in Brampton. Budget overruns that weren't overruns. The difference moved through a numbered company registered in Rochelle's maiden name, opened 18 months after their wedding. Small amounts, carefully spaced. Over 4 years, $217,000. I sat with that for a long time. Then I put on the gray wool suit that Marguerite had picked out for my sister's 60th birthday. I put on the tie she'd given me for our 30th anniversary. I drove to Toronto. The Ontario Superior Court in downtown Toronto is a serious building. I had been inside it a number of times over 32 years of business, and I had always felt at home there. In the way that men who have read contracts carefully feel at home in rooms where contracts are enforced. My son arrived 20 minutes after I did. He had shaved. He was in his Navy suit. He had composed his face into something that looked like worried concern. He was good at arranging his face. He stopped when he saw me standing in the corridor, dressed and calm. His face went through several things in quick succession, before settling on nothing. Aldworth made the argument first. He was polished. He spoke about erratic financial decisions, about my sudden disappearance from the family, about the disruption caused to 32 employees and an active construction portfolio. He said the word deterioration twice. He said, my son's only concern was his father's well-being and the stability of the business I had built. Then Holden stood up. He played the recording. The courtroom was very quiet while my son's voice filled it. Bergman can do the assessment. We just need him to sign one document and we can undo all of this. When it finished, Judge Pelletier looked at my son and asked if that was his voice. My son looked at Aldworth. Aldworth said nothing. I'll ask again, the judge said. It's taken out of context, my son said. Holden put the financial records on the table. The numbered company, the $217,000, the 18 months of careful, quiet movement. My son stopped talking. Judge Pelletier looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Mr. Holt, he said to my son, not to me, to my son, you have alleged your father lacks the mental capacity to administer his own trust. The evidence before this court suggests that while he was supposedly losing his mind, he was also patiently documenting the fraudulent diversion of company funds and recording a conspiracy to circumvent a legitimate legal instrument. I would encourage you to reflect on what that says about the relative judgment in this room. Then I stood. Your Honor, I said I'd like to address the question of my grandson. They had not hurt Leo. I want to be clear about that. Whatever my son had become, he had not laid a hand on the boy. But using an 8-year-old as leverage, telling him grandpa was sick, telling him to be scared, using his love as a tool, that is its own kind of harm. There was also a note from Leo's teacher, a report about a child who flinched. Rochelle's rages documented on 2 occasions by the school. Nothing that stood alone, everything that stood together. Judge Pelletier granted me interim custody before noon. Rochelle was still arguing when the court officer stepped toward her. My son was escorted out by 2 officers, not roughly but firmly. The RCMP fraud unit had been briefed the night before. There would be an arraignment, there would be a process. I walked out of that courthouse into a cold, clear October afternoon and stood on the steps for a minute, breathing the city air. Then I drove to Etobicoke. Leo was sitting on the front steps of his grandmother's house with a hockey card in his hand. He looked up when my truck came down the street, and I saw his shoulders drop, the way a child's do when something they've been holding comes loose. Grandpa, he said. I crouched down, my knees were not happy about it. Hey, bud, I said. He looked at me for a moment. Is Dad going to be okay? I thought about how to answer that honestly, without answering it fully. Your dad is going to have to do some hard thinking, I said. He'll be all right. Leo nodded and held up the hockey card. I found this in my bag, the Austin Matthews one. Did you put it in there? I hadn't, but I smiled. Must have fallen in, I said. He considered that. Grandpa, what's an arrest exactly? I laughed. It surprised me. It came out whole and sudden, the real kind. It means, I said, that whatever you want to be when you grow up, you'll have a head start getting there. He thought about that with the seriousness of an 8-year-old. Even if I want to design hockey rinks? Especially then, I said. We drove north together that afternoon. Not to Oakville. There was nothing for me in that house anymore. We drove to the cabin. I had called ahead to have the heat running and the fridge stocked. Holden was handling the machinery, the family lawyer, the custody forms, the interim order, the fraud proceedings grinding slowly through the system in the right direction. He was good at the machinery. That evening, Leo and I sat on the dock with fishing lines in the water. We hadn't caught anything and likely wouldn't. It was late October and the fish had better sense than us. That wasn't the point. The lake was flat and dark. The birches had gone to yellow. The light came in low and long, the way it does in Muskoka at this time of year, like the afternoon is taking its time leaving. Grandpa, Leo said. Why did you build your company? I thought about it. I had a family, I said, and I wanted them to be all right. Are we all right? I looked at him. He was watching the water, the fishing rod loose in both hands, perfectly comfortable in the cold. Yeah, I said, we're all right. He nodded and didn't say anything else. Sometimes that's the whole conversation. My phone buzzed. Holden. Fraud charges confirmed, both names. RBC froze the numbered company this morning, 14LK in it. CRA has been notified, arraignment next month. Also, the RESP account is untouched, still growing. I put the phone face down on the dock boards. Later, I would hear from my son through his new lawyer requesting a meeting. I sat with that message for 3 days. Then I sent back 4 words. Not yet, maybe never. Because here's what 67 years has taught me. Sitting on a dock with a boy who asks about hockey rink design and falls asleep before 8 o'clock and leaves his socks in the middle of the floor like it's a talent. I did not build Holt Construction Group so that someone could call it theirs. I built it because I was 28 years old and I had a woman I loved and a son on the way, and I wanted to give them something real, something I could be proud of when I was too old to lift a level. The RESP certificate is framed now, on the cabin wall between the window and the coat hooks. $2,000 and a government match. Small. Completely unimpressive to anyone who measures worth by what a dinner costs or who can hear them laughing. But it was given with love, and it was rescued with love, and it will be used by a boy who wanted to dress up nicely for his grandfather's gift. And that is the only kind of value I know that compounds without limit.